All right, welcome back to the show. My name is Ryan Morrison, and today's guest is Hien Lam. He is a multidisciplinary creative and brand strategist based in Ann Arbor, Michigan. He's the co-founder of Huck Finch, a branding and webflow development studio that helps growth stage startups build authentic, impactful brands. Hien also recently launched with his co-founder a similar branding and webflow development agency called GrabBag, centered on the pre-seed to Series A startups. Welcome to the show, Hien.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. I'm super excited to have you too. And, we've known each other for many years now.
Yeah.
And I was trying to remember, when was the first time we even met? Do you recall?
It was definitely during COVID. I never remember that. I can't remember. I think maybe you were still in school, right? I think you were probably starting to graduate, getting ready to graduate. And then you were talking to me about Maximize, maybe what the impetus and the beginning of it, conceptualizing it. And yeah, it's been a minute.
Yeah, it's been a while. And so I'm grateful we've just been able to develop a relationship over time.
Yeah.
And I'd love to give people listening an opportunity to get to know you better. And because I think you are a really awesome person, but you're also providing so much value as a ecosystem supporter and a champion of the Ann Arbor startup ecosystem. So maybe let's take a step back and talk a little bit about your upbringing. Talk about, because you told me you're self-proclaimed mutt. So, your parents were living in Vietnam, but, they have different backgrounds. So maybe just talk a little bit about that and what it was like growing up. And you're actually from California too. So just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, like you said, I'm from California, from the Bay Area originally. So both my parents came over from Vietnam. My dad was an immigrant. He came over when Saigon fell in 75. My mom was a refugee. She was a boat person. She came over in 81. And they met as day laborers. They were picking strawberries in Central California, and that's where they met. And they got together. And then like you said, I'm a bit of a mutt. So while they're from Vietnam, my mom is Chinese by ethnicity. My dad's half Vietnamese, half Japanese. So a little bit of everything. It's kind of funny because I usually get Korean when people take a guess. So they could have gone with any option, but they went with that one. So, but I get it. I think it's the hair really. And but yeah, the other thing about me is when I was one, my dad suffered a couple of strokes, so he was a paraplegic. So I grew up taking care of him while my mom was she was a caregiver to him officially. I spent my childhood pretty much taking care of him. So because of that experience, you mentioned my background, I actually, like any good Asian, I always jokingly say I had aspired to be a doctor because of all the care, the bad care that he received, and I was like, he deserves better, and other patients do too. And I want to be a doctor that can provide good patient care. And here I am now talking to you about brand.
Yeah, it's quite the evolution. So I think there's a couple of things to kind of expand upon there. And I didn't know that situation with your dad. And actually, it's something that we share. I don't know if I told you that, but my dad is also handicapped. He's not a paraplegic, but he is bedridden. He lost his ability to walk when I was 13.
Wow.
Yeah. So
I didn't know that. Yeah. That's so weird. We've known each other all these years, but we didn't know that about each other.
Yeah. We needed to do a podcast to get to know each other better. So that makes more sense than studying healthcare in school, going for your master's, right?
Yep.
But let's talk a little bit more going back into California, because a lot of people, I guess, glorify California and LA and San Francisco as tech hubs. And you found yourself into tech through the branding side. So what actually brought you out to Michigan in the first place?
Yeah, the big thing was, as I mentioned, I grew up with my dad being a paraplegic, so I pretty much was stuck at home all day long. If my mom was out working, cutting hair, I was at home taking care of my dad. So I was pretty much homebound, and that gave me a lot of alone time, but also it made me itch to want to get out of the house and travel and stuff. So when I was in high school, I actually got to go and live in Germany for a while. And then that just kind of led to the decision of, I can stay home and go to school and go to a good school, obviously, like Berkeley, but it was just too close to home. And I just wanted to be able to expand my horizon, and I wanted to not get stuck in a small group of friends and just comfort, right? And I just wanted to be uncomfortable and be comfortable being uncomfortable. And I met somebody who transferred to my high school. He's from the Midwest, from St. Louis originally, and he was like, "Hey, I'm applying to Michigan. It's a good school. You should consider it if you're looking to leave the state." And so I applied, and then it just kind of came down to here and the University of Chicago, and this just ended up being the better choice for me. And after college, I left and moved to St. Louis for a few years. That's where I got my master's. And then after 4 years there, was ready to move on. My girlfriend, now wife, and I always anticipated we'd find our way back to California, which was why we stopped in St. Louis, because we're like, well, we would never actively choose to move here, so let's give this a try. And then found our way back to Ann Arbor and just have been here ever since.
Wow. So that's funny because that's another thing that we share. So I'm also from California, Los Angeles. I think you may have known that. And then we both went to undergrad here at U of M, and then we both ended up staying in Ann Arbor. And now we're in the same circles, and we serve some of the same clients, but we also just have, same meetups and things that we go to, and we're always bumping into each other. So let's unpack more of the, your undergrad experience, because I think that it's really interesting how you studied Buddhism and history in undergrad. Then you went to St. Louis to basically get your master's in health tech. And then now we're going to get really deep into the branding part of what you do now. So just talk about that evolution of your career path and some of the things that you've learned through those experiences in school that have translated now into what you're doing with Huck Finch.
Yeah, it's I've realized that something about me is I don't want to sound like I'm a hipster or anything like that, but I've always been kind of drawn to doing things differently. I always just kind of see if people are doing this, then how am I ever going to stand out? And I think maybe a lot of that is due to the fact that maybe I don't think very highly of myself, and so if I'm going in the same direction as everybody else, there's no way for me to stand out, right? I can get an A, but there's going to be someone who's going to get an A plus plus. There's no way for me to compete, essentially. So I'd rather be a big fish in a small pond, kind of that's always my mindset. And so when I came to Michigan, I knew I was pre-med, and I knew also most people who are pre-med are going to major in biology or going to be in engineering. There are very particular majors that they all gravitate to. And so immediately I crossed those off the list. I was like, I'm not doing these, because out of 1,000 applications, I'm never going to stand out on this thing. I need to stand out some way or another. And then the other part was it too. I was like, I don't want to take nothing but science classes. I want to be a well-rounded, doctor, which was always still the intent, right? And I looked at it as the experience with my dad and his care. I was like, I'm pretty sure all those guys and women who, took care of him went down this deep science background and still gave him, not the best care. So I was like, let me try something different then, because it's not working that way. And so I always gravitated to history. I always liked it. And then I needed an extra credit to be a full-time student. So I was looking for a class, and I saw Intro to Buddhism, and I was like, hey, I grew up Buddhist. This should be an easy A. I think I got a B plus, which was kind of disappointing, but the good news is I ended up really falling in love with it from a philosophical standpoint. Growing up, I never really cared for the rituals of it. I just did it to do it because that's what any kid's gonna do. But it was after learning more about the actual teachings behind it and the philosophy that I became really enamored with the philosophy.
Yeah, I wanna hear more about that too, and what you've learned about Buddhism through now thinking about it from a philosophical standpoint. What I know about Buddhism is that it's a lot about separating yourself from your ego, right? And there's the Eightfold Path, and there's other things like that. So what could you tell us about what you know about Buddhism and how the philosophy kind of informs like your day to day, and if you want to talk about how it informs branding and stuff like that too, I'd be really curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. So the most important thing in Buddhism is the idea of samsara, and samsara is it's the Sanskrit word for suffering, and if there's nothing else in the world that connects each and every one of us as human beings, and more broadly in the Buddhist terms, like sentient beings, is that we all suffer, right? Like in some way or another, we all know suffering. Like whether our sufferings may differ, but like we can all understand like the idea of suffering. Like if you found out that what someone that I love passed away, like you can understand that suffering in some capacity, right? And that's something that connects us all. But the thing that leads to suffering is our desire to hold on to things, believing that they're permanent, like they'll last forever, right? So at the end of the day, with Buddhism, like the thing that it teaches us is that the world is impermanent, and it's our fixation on things, believing that they're permanent, that leads to our suffering. And the root of Buddhism is teaching you to let go of things and just focusing on the fact that life is impermanent. And so it does weirdly inform like the work, because like when just going back a little further, before we even started our studios, like we kind of just kept saying yes until we opened the studio. There was never a goal of ours. It was not on the vision board at all. Matt and I, we were working at a consultancy, and at some point we just both hated the work. Between the work itself, the company culture, and just not feeling a sense of fulfillment, and like we were essentially living the American dream, but we weren't happy. And we just got over, sat down over drinks, and we were talking. And I was talking about like how I was trying to apply like Buddhist thinking to my life, and he was applying like Stoicism. And there's a lot of overlap in terms of the logic and thinking about like the end is going to come for each and every one of us. And so we just started a blog that just kind of mashed these ideas together. And one of the things that we did as a part of our workshops was essentially a eulogy exercise. Is that, given that we all will pass away, like how do you want your eulogy to go when that day finally comes? And so what can you do to ensure that you're living that life where people will say these things about you? And we just took inspiration from that, and we just carried it towards brands. Like when we do work with brands, particularly larger brands, we always kind of like work backwards for them. It's like, well, one day when this business is no longer in existence, like what impact do you want it to have had? And how do we then translate that to the brand and the website to ensure that that's how people remember it? So it's kind of this weird roundabout way of kind of incorporating these philosophical ideas into the work.
I really love that, because I think in startups, they teach you a lot of the time to kind of start with the end in mind, or at least the good teachers, the good mentors, like start with the end in mind, because then you can kind of reverse engineer what you need to do on your roadmap to actually get there.
Yep.
Right. And then you start with these big rocks, right? Have you ever seen that video of some speaker? Plenty of people have demonstrated it, but they have the glass jar.
Yeah, with the sand and the rocks.
Yeah. So you always start with the big rocks first, and then you put in the pebbles, and then you put in the sand last, because it actually helps you to fill the cup. But if you did it the reverse, if you start so granular, then you actually can't fit everything into the jar. So I think that's a really beautiful way of demonstrating that same concept, is like start with the big thing, start with the end in mind, and then you can get there where you want to go.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think particularly for like tech startups and tech businesses, especially as they go out to get funding, and their investors are always going to ask, like, what's their exit plan? And it should, like they should say it very confidently, like what they want to do, and rather than just kind of like have it feel like they're just making it up on the spot. So if you don't start with the end in mind of kind of what you want ultimately for this, then it's hard to communicate that, right?
Absolutely. So let's unpack that more. I want to come back to the naming of Huck Finch. So did I read it correctly, or do I assume correctly about blending two of your favorite, you and Matt's, right, favorite books together to
Yeah.
come to the name. Maybe just tell us about how that came together.
Yeah. So I think this goes back a little bit to like the idea earlier where we're like, well, we don't want to do the common thing, which is like, you know, come up with a studio name that's very like on the nose, you know, like, so we're like, well, this is going to be a little bit different. We want it to have personality. We want the brand to be a personality. And so we couldn't really figure it out. And then one day Matt texted me. He was like, what about something with like, with Huck? Because he's like, I really like Huckleberry Finn. And I was like, at first I said Guy Montag from Fahrenheit 451 because I really like that book and that character. But then after saying it, I was like, well, now there's an H, there's an M. We're both H and M, and I was like, I don't want people associating it being that. And then I was like, what about Scout Finch? Like, let's go with that instead. And because I just always was drawn to Scout. I know most people when they hear Finch, they're like, oh, Atticus. And that's exactly one reason why I want it to be about Scout, because people don't think about her immediately. But for me, she's always the one that stands out in the book because she's just very like who she is. She's, Atticus is very principled. Like, I appreciate that about him as a character, but she's strong. She stands up to people. She stands up for what's right in her mind. And she's also just rebellious. And I just like saw a lot more of myself in her than I did in Atticus. So I was like, so that's kind of how we combined the two names together.
That's right. And that's Scout Finch is from To Kill a Mockingbird,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I think it's genius, and it really comes back to something that you've been living through your life. That common thread is that you wanted to do something different. You wanted to stand out, and so I think that really resonates in your brand with your company, and I think that's a nice segue into talking about personal brand versus company brand. So, I think you know both really well, but let's talk about company brands. So when someone is at the stage where they're starting to think about brand, right? What are some of those early steps that they can do? Because you said it in one of your earlier podcast episodes, bourbon and what was it?
Brand.
Bourbon and brand. Yeah. So I heard in one of your previous podcast episodes, we were talking about it's so much more costly to have to redo your brand and relaunch it and change that perception in so many people's minds. So if you can, try to get it right from the start. So what does that start look like? If a founder is lucky enough to come into contact with you early enough in their journey before things are super set in stone, what are those early steps that they can take?
Yeah, the one of the first things we always ask as a part of our exercise is, if your brand was a person, like, what would they be like? Like, what would they look like? What would they sound like? And ultimately, like, how would they make people feel? Like, what value are they bringing, to their community? And I think that speaks a lot to kind of like the brand that you can create and want to make. And then what I always love to do is take the value part of it and figure out a way to like, well, how do we like visually and like verbally and message wise, like communicate this, in a almost like subliminal way. And so it's not on the nose, because when it's on the nose, it just feels like, oh, like it doesn't feel real. But yeah, you just really want to elevate it in like in a subliminal way as much as possible, because I think the best brands are the ones that make you think and feel what they want you to think and feel about them. Like Duo, for example, we're here in Ann Arbor. Like part of the value prop of Duo is the ease of it, right? Like that dual factor authentication, how easy it is. And so the brand itself should and look and feel very easy and very chill, like relaxing. Like it'd be very weird if the value is selling ease, but then like every other cybersecurity company was just selling like this like doomsday, you're gonna get hacked, like everything's gonna get breached. It just like flies in the face of the ease part of it. So like why don't we just lean into that as part of the brand? And so for us, like, neither Matt and I are designers by trade. We didn't go to school for it. We are non-designers in the designer world, basically. And so part of that could be viewed as a weakness, or we can elevate it as a strength. And so we elevated a strength by saying, like, let's just do basically the opposite of what every agency is going to typically do, to say that, like, hey, we're not trying to be like another agency or studio, because we could never be that. Like, we don't have the background. But that's exactly why you should probably want to work with us, is because we're not just going to give you the same result as any other agency or studio can, because, you know, they're just kind of essentially, I don't mean this like in an insulting way, but essentially kind of carbon copies of each other, right? Like, they just kind of all work and function the same way, and we don't. So let's just call that out.
Right. That makes sense. And, you know, that was something that you came and hosted a workshop with us once last summer for our Catalyst program, which is, for those who don't know, helping college students graduate with a degree, a business, and a career as an entrepreneur. And something that really stuck out for me was that there's a difference between like brand architecture and like the actual brands. So, you know, if you're building something huge, which so many founders are trying to build a big vision, but you have to be careful because you don't want to dilute your message to your core audience. And I think early on in startups in particular, they're trying to figure out, who's my ideal customer persona? Who is that? You know, who am I messaging to? And then how do I want them to feel? And how do I want them to talk about me? And those different branding elements. But, you know, you taught me that in the market for our company, Maximize, it was like a little diluted because people saw us as the community that was helping students, but they didn't know of all the things that we're doing specifically on video production. And like, now we have a podcasting service and these other things. So we had to split up our brand into these different elements to reach those audiences. So I guess that leads me to, you know, like, what are some of those most common pitfalls that founders make early on when they're establishing a brand?
Yeah, I think the biggest one always is they view the product that they're building as the brand. And that's the most common pitfall that a startup will fall into. And the most common reason why they have to rebrand is because the name is so connected to this product, or all the messaging is related to this product. And then the moment they try to get into a new market, or they're trying to launch a new product, it just won't work because people are just like, you know, it's like if Duo, for example, we've been talking about them, like if they realize that they want to open an ice cream shop, like no one's going to go like think of them like, hey, let's go to Duo, like let's buy their ice cream. And that's obviously the extreme example, but like it's just, you know, they are what they are, which is like they work in the cybersecurity space, like, but because they're in cybersecurity, they can expand beyond just the dual factor authentication if they want to, because they can just still play in that. But yeah, that's the biggest one. It's like we always have to remind people to split.
Okay, let's jump back into the kind of pillars of a brand. So could you talk us through those key areas of how to build a brand?
Yeah. So I think first thing is, like with anything, when people say brand, they immediately associate it with like a couple key things like a logo or whatever. And like, they're obviously important elements of a brand, but they're not necessarily pillars. Like there's nothing memorable about a logo until you make it memorable, right? And you have to build that brand equity to add like cachet and value to it. Like, and then the story always goes that like Phil Knight hated the Nike logo when his secretary created it, and it really meant nothing until, you know, it meant something, right? So, but with that said, like some core brand pillars that you'll need are a brand promise. So essentially, like, what is the promise that I'm going to fulfill as a brand if you use my product or use my service? And then, you know, that the messaging, all in your marketing has to communicate that promise, both to your potential customers, your partners, your potential employees, and then your product has to fulfill that promise. So that's where those two have to live together. And most of the time, brands either have really great marketing and the product does not fulfill the promise, or the product is really great, the promise is fulfilled, but they can't get anybody to like convert, right? So you got to find that balance of the two. The next would be your brand pillars, which essentially is like you have this brand promise. So how do you now communicate that brand promise? And it's in addition to communicating the brand promise, it's also communicating like how you're doing it differently too. Because the thing you'd also have to recognize is that you're not the only one doing what you're doing, but you're the only one doing it the way that you do it. So you might as well like speak up the things that are about you that are unique, but also ensure that they're messaged in a way that would resonate with your audience. And so brand pillars, usually I like to think of them as three different like key messages that support like your brand promise. And then from there, it's really about taking all of that and coming up with like a messaging strategy of how you then communicate this to your customers. And there's a chasm that you're trying to bridge, right? So you have to keep asking yourself like what needs to be translated, what's going to get lost in translation, where are they going to get confused, what minimum amount of information do my audience need to have already for them to even understand what I am talking about. And so you really got to like think through all those things before you can come up with a clear message that you can communicate to somebody. An example of this would be I spent a summer in Nepal when I was in college. When I was still pre-med, I was trying to do something that looked a little different. And I started a vaccination program for orphans there. But in addition to that, I started a health education program for these orphans. Big issue is they don't have the same vaccines that we do here, and they end up dying from just waterborne diseases and things that we take for granted all the time. And so the program was like, hey, since you're interested in healthcare, like, do you want to create a health education program? I was like, sure. Would this be the first one? And they're like, no, other people have been doing this, but you can make your own version of it. And again, like back to the, why am I doing the same thing everybody else is doing? Like something. So I was like, well, if everybody else is doing this before, then if it's not working, why would I do that again? They're like, what I realized from my own personal background was that these kids don't have an understanding of biology the way that we do, right? Like if you go to a 5 or 6-year-old kid now in America or in the Western world, if you said the word germ, most likely like 9 out of 10 of them are going to know what the hell that is, but not in Nepal. Like not because they're not educated or smart, but it's just not part of the cultural realm, right? So I was like, well, like I could sit here and talk about germs all day long with them, but if they don't have this basic foundational understanding, like all of this is going to be lost. So I had to translate it to talk about like there are spirits in their hands, and there are good ones and there are bad ones, and they need to wash away the bad ones before they eat, or else they're going to make them sick. And immediately they grasped that. They understood what I meant. And so that's just a weird example to kind of explain like, you know, the intention was good there about teaching anybody about germs and like washing your hands and what it can mean for you if you don't. But if I didn't take the time to realize and understand that, hey, these kids are never going to understand this, then I could have honed that education program as much as I wanted to. I could have poured hundreds of hours into it, but it was never going to resonate because the key thing was I was trying to speak a language that they didn't speak.
Right. Yeah, you got to meet your customers or your, in this case, audience where they are.
Yeah.
Right. And speak in ways like, I was listening to an Alex Hormozi video recently. I really enjoy his stuff because he's a Stoic and he's also a business philosopher. Mm-hmm. So he speaks in these, ways that I guess Aristotle might speak, but he's just a businessman, right? And what he was saying is that your goal as a business owner should be to know your customers' problems so well that they believe that you've actually experienced it yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And in some cases you will, in some cases you won't. You become passionate about a problem, but they want to believe that you are an authoritative expert, right, on that problem, and that you've already anticipated their problems, you've already anticipated their objections for it. And if you know them that well, then they're going to immediately trust you, and trust that you can help them, mm-hmm. right? Do you have any thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's so true. At the end of the day, like it's all about building trust and confidence, right? Like, asking somebody for $1 and getting that $1 is easily one of the hardest things you can do in life, because no one wants to give money to a stranger. And the only way that you can build trust and confidence is through your ability to show that you understand their challenge, their problems, their pain. And by doing so, then that means you probably have the solutions to that because you can speak to it so well. And I don't think you would be in business very long if you can speak well to the problem but don't have the solution for it. And you're going to be like a snake oil salesman, right? Like people are going to catch on real quickly, and that's going to spread like wildfire. So yeah, I mean, it's all about just showing that you can do something through trust. Like it's all about establishing that trust.
Right. So in your opinion, how does personal branding fit into that? Right. So it's something that we've talked about offline and something that we're, building towards something here. So talk about that, and how are you thinking about personal branding now more than ever with AI and things coming? Like, is there more of an emphasis on it, less of an emphasis on it? How does it help? Does it hurt in any ways? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think like with brand in general, but with personal brand, like there's just so much noise, right? And there's so many ways to now more than ever to be able to like communicate and share your personal brand that I think it comes down to two things. Like, and it's the same with the business. Like one, you have to have something worth sharing and talking about that doesn't feel derivative of something else. And the other part of it is like, it just has to be like real. Like, I think that's the one thing that I realize in that, like with essentially the arms race of personal branding that you can do now. There's so many like data points now where you can quickly see like, oh, this person is clearly just doing this because the algorithm they were just working the algorithm. They're doing something to get views or whatever it may be. I don't want to play into that. Maybe there's going to be other people who will be interested in it, but like I want people who genuinely who are going to enjoy what I do. And if you don't, that's fine. Like I'm not for everybody. We can't be for everybody. And the more that we try to game the system so we can get everybody, like the more you realize like there's nothing like there of substance. Like you mentioned, like Alex Hormozy, like he just kind of yeah, he's a business entrepreneur. He talks about business. At the end of the day, a lot of the stuff he talks about probably no different than most other people in the space, like Noah Kagan or any of the other people. But he just does it in his way, and if it resonates with you, great. If it doesn't, then find somebody else. Like that's the other beauty of where we live now. Is like there are other options. Find somebody who fits more along the lines of what you're looking for. But because of that, like knowing that people are fickle and they have options, just go all in on just doing you. Just be as authentically you as you want to be.
I love that. And that's something that if anybody follows you, which by the way, anybody listening should go follow you on LinkedIn and other channels. We can drop some links in the description. Oh, we're pulling it up here. There you are. You post like really genuine, authentic videos and announcements and GIFs. And is that how you say it? GIF or GIF?
I think it's GIF, but I'll go with GIF.
Whatever you want.
Yeah.
GIFs. And so, yeah, thanks for pulling that up, Ben. And I think that's what does really stand out is that, you're not afraid to drop, maybe an occasional F-bomb or something, just like who cares at the end of the day, like just be you. And if people want to work with you, great. And if they don't, like you said, there's options.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I think like for me, like whenever we do brand work, we do like kind of a Mad Lib style of things, right? Because it's always easier when you give people a choice, but not too many, but some choices to work from. And whenever we see people struggle, we always ask them like, oh, what don't you want it to be? Right? So like sometimes it ends up being easier when you think about the opposite of what it is that you don't want it to be. Because when you come up with that, then you can kind of come up with what you actually do want it to be. And so like I always kind of look at it through those eyes all the time. And whenever I'm on LinkedIn or anywhere and I'm like, ugh, I hate this, then I just make a mental note. It's like, I'm just going to do the opposite of it because I don't like it. There's probably someone else who doesn't like it. So I'm just going to write something content-wise that might cater to to somebody else. And if someone, calls it out like in a positive or negative way, then still something. But I just don't want to like just fall into the noise, right? Like we just want to stand up from the noise. But a lot of people say that, like, but then they all end up just wanting to go with the flow because it's easier. So yeah, it's one of the weird, funny things with working with startups. Like usually when you ask them like, well, what does the brand look like? A lot of them will say like, oh, we're bold, we're innovative. And you try to give them a bold and innovative look and feel, and they're like, that's too bold, which makes sense. Like it's in brand, like you always try to, it's that push and pull of like, I want to force you to wear, what's the imagery is like, oh, you're going to a black tie event. I want you to wear a red suit with a red tie. You're going to stand out, but that's almost standing out too much. And so what you want to find is the ability to like, well, why don't you just still wear the black suit, but wear a red tie? Because that way you'll stand out a little bit. So it's just that little bit of difference that will make you stand out. But but as a designer, you want to try to push them to the red suit first. And then you're like, all right, how about we compromise on the red tie?
Right. That makes sense. So I guess that brings me to like, what do you think is like the greatest opportunity in terms of brand over the next 2 to 3 years? And does AI inform that at all? Or what's your opinions if, for people who are curious about brand building?
I think like, obviously I don't have the answers. I think the biggest opportunity is obviously use AI, right? Like it's here, it's going to stay, like incorporate it into your life and your work, because there's opportunities for it to like make things more streamlined and easier for you, so you can focus your time on areas that are more productive for your work and more impactful. So with that said, I think the more that individuals can lean into non-AI stuff, I think that's a great opportunity for brand, because I think it's almost kind of like people who are into like vinyl, right? Like there's just going to be people, I think, that more and more are going to be like, I'm oversaturated with AI. I just want to like have a real interaction with real people and read real content and see real work. That I think that's going to be the greatest opportunity over the next 2 years, is that like the more, we're still in the infancy of AI. Not everyone has adopted it yet, but I don't know about you, but for me, like whenever I see like these stupid AI like trends where people put like themselves as a toy or whatever, it's cute and all, but like it's also so stupid. It's like great, you saw someone else do it, now you're doing it. Like what is that for? Like why? So you can write a LinkedIn post saying that you did it? Like no one's paying attention to it, and if they are, they're just annoyed with it that you're doing it, right? So just like using, it's like AI is in such an infancy right now that I think we're just going to get oversaturated with it, and people are just going to like want to get away from it, So it's like kind of now seeing some Gen Zers using like digital cameras or even cassette players, because they just want to play with something that's somewhat analog, because their life was, they were born and in the digital age, everything in their life was digital, and they're like, oh, there was something before this, let me play around with that. That's kind of cool. And I think we're gonna like push so far in the pendulum to AI that everyone's just gonna want to like swing back the opposite direction. We're like, can I just get something that's non-AI related, please? Like I just want something real.
Yeah. I think that we're in the same boat on that front, is that's where things are going, but people are going to get sick of it really quick. And you can already hear some people, right, talking about that. So I'm fascinated to see, how everything shifts, because it can happen so fast too. That's the thing, is that the speed of innovation, the speed of execution, the speed of getting new ideas out there is just so much faster now that it is harder to break through the noise. It is harder to get something out there, because now the playing field has been leveled a little bit in a sense. The barriers to entry have all been decreased.
Yeah. And the other thing too is, because it's in such an infancy, that like nobody can really speak of AI in a real value prop way. Like they just say like powered by AI. I was like, what does that mean? Like, how does that solve my problem? Right, we're going back to that problem solving. How does that solve my problem better? Like, no one's been able. I don't think no one's been able to clearly articulate how AI is making the solution better to solve somebody's problem. And maybe it's because there isn't an answer to that, like a real answer. Or maybe someone is just assuming that like the buzzword is AI, and so they're just sticking with AI. But because of that, like I think we're kind of in this like Wild West like world of AI now, where like no one really knows what they're doing with AI, and no one knows really how to utilize AI, and so it's just kind of like a big mess, right? So like it makes it that much harder for it to really kind of like become really truly meaningful. And as you said, like things are changing all the time. That like what we might be using for AI today might not necessarily be a thing for tomorrow, because that's all gone now. That's not even a thing anymore.
Yeah, totally. I think you're right. A lot of people are experimenting with it. I think some people might know better than others where it could lead. And I do think that the value proposition could be clearer for some people. But for me, I'm just really excited about how can you build something authentic online. I think that's something that we share, is like, how can your brand stand out, whether it's your business or your personal brand. And I'm really curious about how can leveraging that personal brand, because everyone has one at the end of the day, but I think there's a difference between, people knowing you and like knowing what you're about, but then actually like you like really taking it seriously and investing into more people knowing about you and what you can do. And so I've just become fascinated about that, and I'm excited about exploring those pillars with you on how can Michigan in general, right? Coming back to us building in Ann Arbor, how can we leverage that as a strength and have a different positioning than maybe the rest of the country on how do we put the world on notice about what's happening here? Because there's so much investment going on in Detroit. You can see billions of dollars being poured in, like, for example, the Michigan Central building, right? And they're creating these huge magnets. And then now they're also redoing the Riverwalk. And now they're talking about this, Ann Arbor to Detroit corridor. They're building an innovation center for the University of Michigan to Detroit. They're trying to do autonomous highway. Like, there's so much happening. But do you get a sense that we're not doing a good enough job as individuals, but then also as a state, of actually putting the world on notice? Or do you think that we're doing a good job and maybe I don't have the knowledge that you may have?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak to my limited exposure to it and what I see from my own eyes. But as far as I can tell, I think we're doing a shit job of it. And, I could be better at it too, to kind of like shout it from the mountaintops about, hey, like, you don't need to go to New York. You don't need to go to LA. You don't need to go to the Bay Area. Like, you can do it here. You don't have to go to Austin or Nashville. Like, just do it in Michigan. Or if you don't do it in Michigan, do it in the Midwest. Like, stay in the Great Lakes region. Go to Chicago or Indy, Columbus. Like, I don't care. Like, just stay. I'm calling it the third coast, right? You don't have to go to the East Coast. You don't have to go to the West Coast. Just stay in the Great Lakes coast. Just do it here, because the more we can draw attention to all the amazing things going on in the Great Lakes region, like, more people will see, and they're gonna want to like learn more about it, get into it, and find their way to Michigan, or for example. So yeah, I think we could be doing such a better job. And I think part about it is that, like, neither one of us are Midwesterners, like, born, but I think we can say that we're Midwesterners now. And there's an aspect of us not being braggadocious, right? We're very kind of like, just, we'll do it, and then once it's good, then we'll talk about it. But that's great. And I think that's great that we're not. But at the same time, like, we should be bragging about all of these things, all those things that you talked about. We should be bragging about how the University of Michigan is one of the best public universities in the world, let alone the country. And we're rolling out, amazing talent that unfortunately they go to school here and then they leave. But we should be trying to keep them here, and not only them, but students at like Michigan State, all over. They should have a reason to stay here, and the more that I think the other part of it about it too is that like we have to give like brands and businesses reasons to come here too. I can imagine myself as a 22-year-old, like, why not move to LA, right? Why not move to San Francisco? Like, I get to go to eat amazing food. I get to like do experiences that I don't expect to be able to have in Michigan, for example. And so the more that we can like grow the entrepreneurial ecosystem here from a tech standpoint, the more businesses are going to realize, hey, people are staying here. There's business opportunities here. We can make money. Let's throw in a Louis Vuitton store in downtown Ann Arbor, like, because we can make money on that. Let's revamp Briarwood and actually make it a real mall for the students who come here. Like, when you walk around that place, like, it's not a mall for a school that costs $50,000 a year. Like, like literally 3 miles away. Like, the stores in there are just, they don't cater to that, and the stores should. We have the student population that can, afford really nice luxury things, and it's not, doesn't have to be purely that, but like the ecosystem, it's just a microcosm of how like Ann Arbor is just not catering to the population of people that we are trying to cater to, right? We're trying to keep people here, but like, aside from liking living in a small college town, like, that's close to a cool like metro area like Detroit, like why would a 22-year-old stay here?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I stay here because I've actually grown I've actually grown to like the seasons. I love Ann Arbor spring summers. They're the best that I've ever experienced. It's like very chill, but also there are hustlers here who are building and trying to put us on the map, right? More so. And I think the university is a huge pull, but like there's so many startups coming out of here that it's actually insane how many companies are coming out of here. And the problem is that they're leaving for the coast because there's more early stage capital there, right? So we need more density and we need those magnets for reasons to stay. I think that if we lean more into marketing, if we lean more into branding and like actually having like people like you and I shouting from the rooftops constantly, but then also your Pete Martins of the world. And, there's other folks in the ecosystem who are championing it and rallying people to want to stay here to build. Like the more and more and more of that we can do, I feel like we can't do enough of that right now, because this is an amazing place to build. Like you're talking about Ann Arbor being ranked consistently among the top places to build your life. Period. Yeah. It's walkable, it's bikeable. You do have great restaurants. But I think the city also and the state needs to embrace that change a bit more too. Yeah. Right. It needs to embrace that we can be bigger. I think that there were maybe some other like, people, at the state level or something like that, or different ranks that, kind of like it to be just like what it is. But in order for us to compete on the national stage, in order for like top talent like you and others to stay here, we have to be able to compete on a national scale. And so that means that we need to shout more.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think like that you're right. I mean, like the more that we can shout it out about how great Ann Arbor and Michigan is in general, the better. Like it's just going to hopefully draw eyes to it as opportunities, because I was familiar with Austin only because of the University of Texas, right? And that I knew nothing about it other between that, South by Southwest. But it wasn't until like my friend, like Noah, decided to move there. I was like, and he was like, I don't want to be in San Francisco anymore because I'm not trying to build $1 billion business. I'm tired of people asking me about it. I just want to build a business. And so he moved there for his reasons, and then it picked up steam. Like enough like big name people like started to like make Austin a home, and everyone was like, I guess I'll start something in Austin. I think we have an opportunity for that to be Michigan next. I think, right? I think Nashville was kind of like the next one that has been a really big one. it's our time to like start to really push like Detroit, Ann Arbor, Grand Rapids, wherever, just Michigan, like come to Michigan.
Yeah.
And then someone big enough will come do something here with enough of a name, enough of a brand, some cachet behind them that it'll start drawing other people here. And then, yeah, it could just be like wildfire.
Yeah. All right, let's do this. You talked about one of the central tenets of Buddhism. We're going to pull it all together here, of being suffering, right? Like how everyone suffers. And then you said one really powerful exercise you went through was like for branding, the eulogy of what do you want people to say about your company at the end of its life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's take it to Michigan. And if you want to do Michigan or you want to do Ann Arbor, totally up to you. But what do you think the quote unquote eulogy of our startup ecosystem is, such that, a 3 to 5 year, even 10-year horizon, right? Because I think we're getting there.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think is that eulogy?
My immediate thought for the Michigan tech ecosystem eulogy is that we end up being the blueprint for other states with a similar history, similar background as us to build up their tech ecosystem as well. And I think that's like such a key thing about the Midwest in general, is that there is such a sense of community and a sense of like giving, unlike California and unlike New York, where it's very much like dog eat dog. I'm going to try to get something out of you first before giving to you, if I'm ever going to give anything to you. Here, it's like people will get their shirt off their back to you, and I think that's just part of like the DNA of the Midwest and of Michigan. And so my mind always goes to like, we create the blueprint for every other state within the Great Lakes region to be able to replicate for themselves, to successfully build up their tech ecosystem.
I love that. I think that's exactly what we should be doing. And, leading with those Midwest values, giving first, being collaborators over competitors, right? Because I think generally there's folks that you and I both know, like Ted, for example, Midwest House, who are trying to build that collective consciousness around Midwest vibes, right? Mm-hmm. And Midwest innovation. And I think we have a great opportunity to, as the heartland, to be able to elevate an entire region, not just a state, right? Which I think is really exciting. So
yeah. I mean, I like to think of the Midwest like more similar to like Europe, like the EU in a way, and that like, sure, you have Germany, France, like Italy, all these different countries, but they're, for the most part, they're easy to travel to each other, and they're all part of like a bigger EU union, right? And that's kind of like true for the Midwest as well, where it's like we can drive from here to Chicago in 3.5 hours. We can drive to Columbus in 3.5 hours. I think Indy is about 3.5 hours away as well. Like all these places are within arm's reach of each other. Like with that in mind, like we should be trying to build a network, try to be collaborative, trying to grow this community and support each other, because we're more likely to be successful. Unlike California, where like to get from San Francisco to LA is an 8-hour drive at least. And New York is kind of on its own island. Yeah. And it wants to be. So yeah, we have this built-in advantage. We might as well take advantage of it.
Yeah. We need that high speed.
Yeah.
Right. Train or whatever rail system.
We do.
To be able to, if I want to go to invest in Detroit one day and then the next day in Chicago and then the next day in Indianapolis or wherever, right? Like it can be a day trip.
Yep.
If we get there, I feel like that's the connectivity piece that we need to really elevate the entire region.
Yeah.
So hopefully if anyone's listening that, can advocate for that or, make that kind of thing happen, there are people who are hungry for it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let's go to this. So let's pull up Huck Finch, and then we'll also pull up Grab Bag. So do you want to give us the quick lowdown on what it's like working with Huck Finch, how people can get in touch, and what the steps are for doing that?
Yeah. So with Huck Finch, as you mentioned at the top, like we work primarily with growth and late stage tech companies. So think your Series B, Series C. And the big thing there is that we're working with a marketing team. They need to have a website that scales, that they can run campaigns on very quickly. But most likely the site is not built for that. It's not built for ease. And it's a common thing. But when I think about a website user or visitor and the user, I always think of not only the people visiting the website, but the people using it, right? And I think a lot of agencies and studios don't have that in mind. And so I'm really trying to like build a website that can scale and grow with a startup at that point. Well, a tech company at that point. And so, yeah, that's kind of like what we do at Huck Finch is really kind of helping growth and late stage companies establish like a website that's as seamless to use as possible.
Absolutely. So, and I mean, something that is always going to be true of working with you and Huck Finch is that they're going to get authenticity. They're going to get their brand like that really resonates with their users because you spend a lot of time. You have a really great process from what I've seen to be able to really make that website resonate and make it functional. And so I think your work is great, and hopefully some people will be able to check it out and get in contact. Talk to us a little bit about the inspiration for Grab Bag and what the difference is between that brand and the Huck Finch brand.
Yeah, so Grab Bag is for early stage startups. So like think your pre-seed to Series A. We're in the early stages. Well, not early. We're in the process of launching a website builder, like a splash page builder for a really early stage. So startups who are like in ideation phase, in stealth, maybe they don't have any kind of funding whatsoever yet, but they need something that looks professional, that can kick ass. Then they can use our website builder and get something up and going, hopefully in a couple of hours versus like grabbing something off of Wix or Squarespace. But GrabBag came about because we were serving these early stage startups underneath the Huck Finch umbrella, but we realized that based on that inability to explain that we understood their problems, we couldn't really talk to both a startup and a tech like a enterprise tech company because they have very different problems. And so rather than trying to force a round peg into a square hole, we're like, well, why don't we just start a second studio and that just specifically geared towards early stage and their needs. So what we've done is we've created like essentially grab bags, like little packages where they're very much geared towards where in the startup roadmap journey is your startup, what are your goals and objectives, and we're going to give you a brand and a website that gets you there. So are you trying to raise your first round? Are you pivoting because customer discovery has led you to realize that your value prop is totally off or your market is off? Like, are you pivoting? Whatever those particular core things a startup is going to do, we have a package for that. So it's very much geared towards that versus just like saying like, oh, I can make you a nice looking website for your startup. It's like, yeah, I look at a website as a business tool. Like it needs to serve a business. It should look nice, obviously, but like when you make the website look good, a table stake, then it really forces you to have this wonder like, well, if any other studio, other agency can make a good looking website, what else am I bringing to the table? And it kind of goes back to like my original thing about being pre-med, where it's like, well, if everybody is gonna be a biology major, like why would a medical school pick me? Right. So it just forces that conversation of having to ask yourself, well, what real value do I bring beyond just making something look nice? And the real value is, I've never created a startup myself, but like I've worked with enough startups to know what the process is like. And I know what you need because I've seen the back end of it on Huck Finch's side of what a growth, Series B, Series C tech company needs. I'm going to set you up to be that eventually. Now, can you achieve it? That's on you. But my goal is to get you there and setting you up from the very get-go to be that. So you don't have to come back to me later and be like, I need a new website now because the performance is bad. It's not optimized. It's like, if you work with us from the beginning, that will never be a problem because my goal is to make sure that's not a problem for you because I know what that looks like as a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, you've worked with so many companies, so you know how to anticipate their challenges and where they're at, and sometimes maybe even tell them like, "Hey, you told me the other day, like you're going to need that pricing page,
Yeah.
right? So might as well build it into the start so that you don't have to come back and, you know, it's like about creating those efficiencies for those founders. So
yeah, efficiency and keeping the momentum going too, because a lot of times like, and then, you know, I've been at fault of this, and it's been a learning lesson, is that like I have to drive the bus where I can drive the bus because I know what they don't know. And I can't just rely on a founder or a startup to be like, oh, can I get that pricing page now? Like, by the time they tell me they needed it like 2 weeks prior. And by the time they're going to get it, it's going to be a month by the time they realize they needed it, when they could have just created it, just let it sit there. And then when they need it, like, oh, we do have that page, let's update it real quickly to the pricing that we need and just launch it. And instead of waiting a month, you have it in a couple hours. Like, you're a startup. Like every minute, all right, counts.
yeah,
So just have it, and rather than need it.
absolutely. Sounds good. Cool. Well, Hien, it's been a true pleasure having you on the show. I really look forward to having more conversations with you too, and especially as we continue to be those champions and ecosystem supporters for Ann Arbor and generally greater Michigan, and then even beyond that and throughout the Midwest. This has been fun, and I just really appreciate having you. I think there's a lot of great wisdom that people will be able to take from this episode. So
yeah, thanks for having me, man. I'm always down to converse with you more and talk more. So it's funny that I took a podcast for us to like learn more about each other's personal lives. But yeah, thanks for having me.
sounds good. All right.